It's really a tremendous pleasure to have Edward Espe Brown on the Pacific Zen Luminaries series. For you, perhaps not familiar with the series, we maybe once every month, month and a half or so, with some breaks in between, we have speakers on, and these could be artists, they could be poets, they could be authors, they could be teachers. And so tonight we have both a teacher and a writer, Edward Espe Brown, and I'm sure all of you were very familiar with him. The Tassajara Bread book, which I believe came out in 1970, is that right,
70.
Edward? Yeah. That became the best-selling book of all time with Shambhala Publications. And his second book,
Pema children
which
came along.
hmm,
Until Pema children came along.
until Pema Children came along. Okay, there's the footnote there. And then Tassajara Cooking became the second best, and then Greens, and then of course he got out a book on Suzuki Roshi called Not Always So. Is that correct?
Yes, not
And
so is I edited a book of his lectures.
yeah, and then we'll be talking about tonight about the most important point, which is a collection of his talks, and No Recipe, which is a book that he got together several years ago. So, Ed, welcome. It's so nice. I've been wanting to have you on for a time, and just to say about Suzuki Roshi and his teaching. I was introduced to Beginner's Mind many, many years ago, and I read it, but I was more interested in the three pillars of Zen sort of vibe. And then 15 years ago or so, I reread Beginner's Mind, and I was just so amazed and so impressed by his teaching. And I've had tremendous interest in his teaching ever since. And let me just read something, an exchange between you and Suzuki Roshi, and then I'd like to just read a very short passage that you wrote in No Recipe and to lead off. Suzuki Roshi told you it was kind of a very difficult time in the kitchen. He said, Ed, you're the cook. When you wash rice, wash the rice. When you cut carrots, cut the carrots. When you stir the soup, stir the soup. When you cook, you're not just working on food, you're working on yourself. You're working on other people. And similarly, you write, Ed, as with meditation, cooking is not a matter of getting or having, but a vehicle, a mode of manifesting your innate good heart and benevolent hands. Your spirit becomes food, food for yourself and food for others. Very immediately and very directly, you give life to life. How sweet is that? You offer what you have to offer. So, welcome, Edward S.B. Brown. I wonder, you've got a very fascinating story of how you first met Suzuki Roshi and how you first were introduced to Tassajara Mountain Zen Center.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, Roshi John, and thank you all for coming. I love spending time with people who are seeking the way, studying studying how to be you, and live your life in this what can be sometimes a strange world. And one way or another, finding how to offer food, whether it's directly food or, with other work or activity you do. So thank you for being you and doing what you do, finding the way. I was inspired to study Zen partly by my brother. When I was at Antioch College, my brother sent me Zen stories from Paul Reps's book, Zen Flesh, Zen Bones. And one of them was a young man who wrote home to his mother I'm doing really well in school, getting good grades, helping the other kids study, writing well-received papers. And his mother wrote back and said, "Son, I didn't raise you to be a walking dictionary. Didn't you go to the mountains and attain true realization?" And I thought, that's for me. And the end of the school year came and I dropped out and it said reasons for leaving. And I thought, well, duh, to go to the mountains and attain true realization. And sure enough, 2 years later, I was at Tassajara before it became Zen Mountain Center. So when I got back to San Francisco, and then it happened that my brother was, who had sent me the Paul Rep story, my brother was attending Zen Center. So, and parenthetically, since then, my brother has become, first became an Episcopal priest and then a Catholic. So it's been about 30 years, and he was married. He and his wife were married first by Suzuki Roshi and then 25 years later by a Catholic priest, to make it real. And another vernacular. So I knew about Zen Center, and I went one afternoon with a friend of mine, Alan, and we didn't know what we were doing. And everybody seemed to know how to sit, but we didn't. And so we just sat cross-legged, and we didn't know all the forms, and we followed along as best we could. And at the end, in those days, each person, one by one, each student would bow to Suzuki Roshi. So at this time, I was 20 years old, and it came my turn to bow, and I wondered, what will he think of me? Isn't that what you want to know? What does
This is good. This is good.
And we bowed, and I kind of peeked and looked in his face, and there wasn't a single thought of me. He had a way of being so impassive and yet completely receptive. 30 or 40 years later, I read in Dogen, he said, "Supreme, perfect, utmost enlightenment, what is that? It's to be unstained. To be unstained is like meeting somebody for the first time and not thinking about whether you like them or not." He was pretty unstained. And many, many people felt like that, completely received and seen through completely. And it was okay. He could see through you, and it was just fine, whatever he saw through to.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's Suzuki Roshi's teaching, and then there's, nothing that can replace that presence that, sees through and is unmoved.
He's so eloquent too, and in English, and English certainly wasn't his native language, but they're still writing books about him. You're still quoting him. You studied with him like 5 or 6 years, and he's been dead, I think, 50 something years, 71. So that's 29 plus 25. That's 54 years. Yeah, it's amazing. And yet he's still very much alive for you.
Yeah. Well, relationships then grow. I thought maybe I would share with you the first Dokusan I had with him. Again, I was 20. Mm-hmm. And formal practice interview with Roshi, where you bow, do half prostrations to the altar, and then to Suzuki Roshi. So the first Dokusan, I didn't know what to say or what to do, and we don't have a form for how Dokusan goes, as some traditions have. And so I didn't say anything, and after a little bit he said, "How's your meditation?" And I said, "Oh, not so good." "What's the problem?" Well, I'm thinking a lot. Is there some problem about thinking? I think it's pretty normal to think, don't you? And I looked for the problem with thinking, and I couldn't find it. And so I didn't want to admit I can't find the problem because I was just saying I have a problem with it. So then I said, well, you're not supposed to. That's what you tell us not to think. And then he talked about thinking and how the problem with thinking is, that it doesn't change unless you stop thinking for a while and let something new inform your thinking, which is, your direct experience and your feelings and your sensations and something like this.
And so you went down to Tassajara like in 1966 or so, and you were already a student of Suzuki's, and you got a job. This is before actually San Francisco Zen Center
Yeah,
bought Tassajara, and you started to work there, I guess, with a buddy, or
uh, it was actually, partly because Richard Baker made it his work, to find a country place for Suzuki Roshi, and had heard of Tassajara and told my friend Alan about it. And then he got a job. There was a handyman, and he said I could get a job in the kitchen, which I did. And I was a dishwasher and the pot scrubber, and then they were making bread. And I asked if they would teach me, and they said, of course. So then I was the dishwasher, pot scrubber, and the baker. And halfway through the summer, one of the cooks quit, and the owners, Bob and Anna Beck, offered me the job of cooking. And I didn't realize until I became a cook that I have cook's temperament, which is this difference of doing something with your heart, and wanting to have a connection, a heart connection with people. And it's not always, anyway, it's challenging to do something with your heart. And there's a kind of vulnerability or risk that is not the same. If you follow a recipe, then if people don't like it, you can say, well, I followed the recipe. You don't like it? Well, I followed the recipe. And if you like it, well, thank you very much. Yeah, not bad, huh? So much of our world is about, did you follow the recipe? Did you follow the the law of the guidelines, the instructions? Did you do what you're supposed to be doing? And are you getting it right? And the right is, are you getting it right in terms of the instructions, or are you able to put your heart into something? So this is an ongoing study for all of us, how to put our heart into, or connect. Put, you say, but even that is not quite right, because it's more that how do we have a warm-hearted relationship between heart and thinking and feeling and body. Somebody today was using hand, head, heart for body, and then different, but is everything in harmony? Is everything intimate? So intimate that you can't tell anymore what is heart, and So some of us are interested in studying that, and others are in the world are trying to get it right. And
so Zen Center acquires Tassajara, which is
Zen Center acquired Tassajara, and Zen Center had $1,000 in the bank and an annual budget of $6,000 a year to pay Suzuki Roshi $500 for the use of the Zendo on Bush Street. And so Zen Center had to raise $25,000 in 3 months, and part of that was the Zenefit, which was at the Avalon Ballroom, and it was 66, so that it's before the prices went up for those events, and the tickets were $5 or $6.
And Jefferson Airplane and all the
Jefferson
the
Airplane,
local lights, right?
Jefferson Starship, Big Brother and the holding company, Quicksilver Messenger Service.
Yeah.
So they played, and the Zen Center got $1,800. And but then there were bake sales and garage sales and donations and fundraising drives, and it all happened. And eventually, one of the biggest donors was I forget his first name, Carlson, who was one of the founders of Xerox, as one of the main donors to Tassajara.
Right. So you find yourself in the first class or the first training period, and now you're the cook, and you're cooking for how many people? 30 people, 40 people, or?
We were. I started in May, and in May and June we had a guest season. That first summer, and then July and August we had a practice period, and for the practice period there were about 70 students that we were cooking for, and for May and June, and then September, October we had a guest season, and so there were maybe 25 or 30 students and 25 or 30 guests, and eventually that got up to be 70 students and 70 guests over the years. So many changes have happened. But yeah, so it was very challenging. And somebody years later said in 2009, they said, let's face it, Ed, your food wasn't very good. And I'm sorry, but you don't remember, do you, that we didn't have any refrigeration? You didn't know about that, right? You're not taking that into account when you say the food wasn't right. And you're not taking into account the space we had to work in, which was, the kitchen had been torn down by mistake, and we worked in a little, out of the crew's dining room, and we set up a little kitchen in there, and we had 5 or 6 people working in a space where there ought to have been 2 or 3 working. And you don't remember all that, do you? I think all in all, we did pretty good. And then we were getting food once a week at best, because it's a 14-mile dirt road, and you don't just pop out to the grocery store to get more ingredients, and you use what you have.
Yeah.
You use what you have in the way of food, and what you have in the way of, and it's Dogen's instructions for the cook. Use the ingredients you're given.
Yeah.
Don't complain about the quality or quantity of the ingredients you're given. And the ingredients include the food, your stamina, your energy, your inspiration, your capacity to work, and how much you can give. And it was interesting, of course. We understood in those days, and it kind of changed over the years, and our world has changed over the years, but certainly in those days, big difference to know that your work is contributing to your community, your face-to-face world, and you see others working, and you work, and everybody is taking care of our community.
Yeah.
It's not like the Dilbert cartoon. If you work hard, Dilbert says, if you work hard, you too can make your boss rich. Face-to-face community.
Yeah. That's tremendous. It must have been an incredible spirit there in those first training periods, and working together like that, sitting together, practicing together. Was Suzuki Roshi down there? Was he leading the training periods, or was that Katagiri at that time?
Suzuki Roshi was, for the practice periods, he was there most of the time. There was one time when he broke his tooth on a stone in the black bean chili and had to go to San Francisco to see the dentist, and everybody was really mad at me. It's your fault that he's broken a tooth, and we're missing 2 or 3 days of the dharma, and it's your fault that we're missing those 2 or 3 days. And I'm thinking, like, you don't know, just without him standing next to you. Like, whoa. But, and it took me a while to figure out, like, oh, that's right. There are a lot of causes and conditions to every phenomena in this world, and not just what any of us did or didn't do. He grew up in Japan. He lived through the Second World War when there wasn't much food. His teeth had been through a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
His teeth that are ready to be broken.
Yeah. And the stone found his tooth. So there you go. It's perfect. But there's a lot of stories too of you trying to get it right and make everybody happy, because people wanted thick oatmeal, they wanted thin oatmeal, they wanted several kinds of milk, they wanted several kinds of sweetener, and you had to, in the end, put out something like 120
Little
bowls or plates of condiments for 40 people or something.
Suzuki Roshi called us all in for a dharma talk, and he said, I don't understand you Americans. When you put so much milk and sugar on your cereal, how will you taste the true spirit of the grain? And I was 21. I thought, what is he talking about? The true spirit of the grain? I'd never heard of the true spirit of the grain. And then he said, what? Did you think you could put milk and sugar on every moment of your life to make it taste just the way you wanted it to? I don't think there's that much milk and sugar in the world. Can't be done. Why don't you taste the true spirit of the grain? Why don't you taste your true spirit? Why don't you taste the true spirit of the people you're practicing with?
Yeah, that's tremendous. I love that. I
You
love that quote. And you were baking a lot of bread, and you were eating a tremendous amount of bread.
tremendous amount of bread. And of course, the funny thing there is that, I don't know about, at the time it wasn't so funny, but it's in retrospect, it's very funny that, and then that we had at that time, and, vegan now has well surpassed the macrobiotics in its duration and will likely continue. But in those days, we had about a third of the students at Tassajara were Zen macrobiotic. And of course, George Osawa, it wasn't Zen. George Osawa just wanted to promote his diet, so he called it the Zen macrobiotic diet. No Zen monastery eats brown rice. I mean, come on, eat white rice. But anyway, Suzuki Roshi put up with it. But at various points at time to time, he would say things like, I love work trips. I don't like food trips. But I'm mentioning that because we were making unyeasted bread as well as yeasted bread, because in their understanding of macrobiotics, yeasted bread was to what they called yin, which was they reversed yin and yang in macrobiotics for some reason, which they have. Mm-hmm. But yin, they say, is the expansive. What's expansive? Usually that's yang, but in their world that's yin. And, that's too yin. It's too yin. So we need to have dense, heavy, thick bread. So we had, and then at lunch we would serve baskets of bread. And many of us would eat, 16, 18 half slices of bread, 8 or 9 slices of homemade bread, and half of them approximately unyeasted bread, and half of them yeasted bread, and with spread on it. And if you wanted to eat more bread, of course, you had to finish the bread that was in your mouth. So you had to eat without really tasting, and you had to just you had to get rid of the bread that was in your bowl to get more out of the communal basket. So this is what's called greed. Which is different than enjoyment, So finally, I realized, why don't I taste what I put in my mouth? It's funny how sometimes you don't need somebody to tell you, but on the other hand, why don't you taste the true spirit?
Yeah.
Because why don't you taste what you put in your mouth rather than just trying to get rid of it to get more?
Yeah.
You have experience rather than wanting to produce the experience in the future that you're not going to have. Anyway, it was all interesting to practice at Tassajara, and I've been thinking about it for years, and many of us felt for many years like, what were we doing? Because almost nobody ever graduated, or sent out in the world to be a teacher, or like. But on the other hand, people. John Joseph was telling me about having Carl Bielefeld on 10 or 12 years ago, who was for some years the head of Buddhist studies at Stanford, and wrote a book on Dogen Zen meditation manuals, and he was a student of Suzuki Roshi's. And so he got out and was successful, but not because he graduated from Zen Center, it's because he left Zen Center.
Well, it's interesting because Zen Center has thrown off an awful lot of, just fascinating culture. I'm appreciative. I'm not a member. I follow more of a koan school than a just sitting school, but I nevertheless appreciate that community and what they've done for Zen in America. It's been a wonderful, wonderful thing. You were, going back to your relationship with Suzuki Roshi. You were, tenzo, or the cook, is one of the highest positions in the monastery, and you wrote something. I just want to ask you about it. And you said, once after a conversation in his cabin in Tassajara, he hugged me, which had never happened before. And when he was holding me, he said, "I will always be with you." And my body turned to light dancing up and down where my spine had been. And in the absence of a body, gauging my heart was no longer a possibility. So I continued to sense his presence here with us, his voice along with my voice, coming through as I write. It's really, really touching and moving. Yeah.
Well, that's the only way you can do it.
Was that soon before he passed away?
No, that was no. That was probably 69 or 70, and he didn't pass away until 71. There's another story which a lot of people remember. Lou Richmond remembers fondly, and Suzuki Roshi used to, there's at Tassajara, there's the main buildings, and then you cross a bridge to go to a lot of the cabins. And Roshi often used to stand on the bridge and look out at the trees and the stream. The stream went underneath the bridge and then connected with the Tassajara Creek. And my cabin was the first one across the bridge, so I would often, when I was walking from the kitchen to my cabin, he would be standing there, and often I would stop and visit with him. And one time he looked over he said, "Ed, you have those stones piled up outside your door of your cabin. It doesn't look so good. We pile stones like that on graves in Japan." I said, "I know, it doesn't look so good, and it's a little unstable. The ground up to the doorstep was a good, 2.5 feet. So I piled some stones there to get from the ground a step up and then into my cabin. But I wasn't a student of rock work or how to do that. So I said, yeah, it not only it doesn't look good, but it's unstable." And then, a number of weeks went by, and one day I saw him in his cabin, and he said, and I was leaving, and he said, "Oh, Ed, by the way, do you know that stone out in front of the office?" And there was this stone that outside the office where everybody got their mail, and in those days, people would smoke a cigarette and read their mail or drink their tea or coffee with reading their mail. And it was in many ways the center of Tassajara, that stone. Aside from, the Zendo. But everybody knew that stone. And he said, "I asked Paul Disco to move it to your cabin this afternoon to be your doorstep. Is that okay?" And I said, Roshi, people are going to miss that stone. People read their mail, sit on that stone and read their mail and drink their coffee and smoke their cigarettes. And he said, we'll get another one. And sure enough, that afternoon, you could hear it coming across the bridge because we had a old Dodge Power Wagon, and we would haul rocks around on the metal sled pulled behind the wagon. Paul Disco was there, and
He was the temple carpenter, right?
temple carpenter, but also
Yeah, yeah.
shop and the stones and so. But it makes a horrible noise. It doesn't make so much noise when the stone is being dragged into the ground, but when it comes across the wooden bridge, it goes. It's really loud, like the proverbial chalkboard scratching. Anyway, and it's probably to this day there's grooves.
Okay, Google, stop.
In the bridge, but anyway, I went out and we moved it over in front of my cabin. We put it on. We put down 2x4s for rails, and then little 2-3 foot long pieces of 2-inch pipe, and you just roll it and take the roller from the back and put it in the front, and it rolled right into place. And talk about, and then I knew my teacher was with me. Every day I stepped on that stone going into my cabin, coming out of my cabin. My teacher was there for me. I mean, really, not just talk.
Yeah. Lovely.
Ground. Stability. So important, these relationships we have.
Yeah.
We can count on.
One thing about his teaching, and I've seen it in your teaching, is really you're embracing the whole of it, the whole of the human emotional experience, including the dark, right? And so the light inside the dark. And he said, Zen is like feeling your way along in the dark. And he extended out his hand in front of him and he said, feeling this way and that, you might think it would be better to have more light, to know where you're going and to get there in a hurry. But Zen is feeling your way along in the dark.
So I don't know how else to do it, John. I keep thinking I could know what to do and how to get there, but I don't get those kind of pictures. Some people do. I'm going to have a center. I'm going to start a cooking school. I will, and occasionally I like, okay, I'll write a book. If I have to. But you're reminding me of actually one of my favorite Suzuki Roshi stories, which David tells in his biography of Suzuki Roshi.
David Chadwick.
Yeah. And David Chadwick and Lou Richmond and I were the last of Suzuki Roshi's disciples in September of 71. It was actually 9/11, 1971. So the more famous 9/11, 2001, was the 30th anniversary of my ordination as a Zen priest. And I thought, oh, it's come to this. I thought being a Zen priest was going to benefit the world. And people said, well, you don't know what worse things could have happened if you hadn't been a priest.
You prevented nuclear war, at least. Yeah. Thank you, Edward.
But the story is, and I wish I had known sooner, but by the time I read David's book, it was too late. But David David was the cook. I mean, I was the cook and David was in charge of the dining room. And we were perpetually understaffed, so he was he would walk around in the afternoon and get to talking with people. He was one of the most gregarious, outgoing, extroverted people that has ever been at the Zen Center. He and Isan Dorsey. And he would get to talking to people. And then when it was time to go to work in the dining room, he'd say, "Hey, I need to go to work in the dining room. Why don't you come and help me out? And we can go on visiting." So he would be recruiting a crew every day. And then those same people he would sit down with at the meal and have a glass of wine with them. And then he'd go back to their cabin later at night and drink scotch or brandy or something, and then he would miss Zazen and breakfast and study and everything the next morning. This kind of behavior does not go unnoticed in a monastic or semi-monastic circumstance. So one morning, finally, the director of Tassajara said in the morning meeting with Suzuki Roshi, and David is sitting right there. David would get up for the meeting with Suzuki Roshi. The director said, "Roshi, what do we do with somebody who's staying up late at night drinking alcohol and then missing the morning practice? Zazen and study and breakfast and service." And Roshi didn't say anything and then cleared his throat and then finally said, "Everybody's making their best effort." It's such a Japanese take, in some ways on how to view the precepts. But anyway, that's a different discussion. But everybody's making their best effort. But Roshi, it's setting a bad example. We need to do something. Other people are going to think they can get away with this too. If we let David get away with this, then anybody will do this. Other students will start staying up late and drinking alcohol. And Roshi said, sometimes people are following the spirit of the rule, even if they're not following the letter of the rule. Wouldn't it be better if he follows the letter of the rule too? Yeah, that would be best. And David is the one who's devoted his life to Suzuki Roshi's legacy.
Yes. Yeah.
And those other people didn't have the same kind of love in their heart. They had the rules in mind. And, it's all important and it's all, like the world we live in. But how do we live with all of that? And ironically, I read this story and, I didn't realize I could, because I was the head resident teacher in 1984. And the officers came to me and said, "James is doing drugs." And I said, "Let me talk to him." And James said, "It was my birthday. My mom sent me a care package. But, excuse me, she didn't send me chocolate chip cookies. She sent me hashish brownies and LSD. And it was way too much for me to take. So I shared it with other students." I couldn't take it all. And isn't it better to share with other students? And he's such a sincere young man and devoted to Suzuki Roshi's memory. And the officers of the monastery said, "James has to leave. He's broken the rules." I said, "If James leaves, he's going to be dead in less than 2 years because he'll be back on the streets of San Francisco. If he lives at Zen Center, he'll be back on the streets of San Francisco. And we're going to lose him." And they said, "That's his problem." And I didn't know what to do. And I let them finally I let them, said, "Okay." And it didn't take a year for us to lose James. So I didn't know. I didn't know the story about David until, his book came out in 96. That was 1984. Mm-hmm. So, so many stories.
Yeah. I haven't talked to you about this, but we're kind of on the subject. And a couple of years ago, you were sort of disinvited from speaking at San Francisco Zen Center.
And is the polite.
Yeah, I'm trying to be polite here. And it was a pretty bullshit story, really, from an outside observer's point of view. but then you were re-invited to come and speak at San Francisco Zen Center maybe a month ago or 2 months ago. And I thought that was really wonderful for them to do and for you to go. How did you feel about that?
Well, the people who canceled me. Oh, we didn't cancel you. We just told you couldn't come anymore. I mean, whatever the vernacular is, I was canceled. And as my friend Paul Rosenblum says, who was in state government for a while, Ed, once you get a reputation, then whether you did it or not, you're out. But, and it's really, anyway, I thought a lot about that. I wasn't put out because of anything I did or didn't do in terms of the Dharma talks and students and things, but because of my relationship with the other teachers and the Abbott's Council. And I told them, I'm not going to meet with you. And I wasn't articulate enough because I was mad at them for not taking my side and and after knowing me for 40 or 50 years, they right away took the viewpoint of someone who was offended. And rather than like, Ed, what happened? And I said, I have talks of the day. And if I had been more careful, I would have said, you have not agreed to listen to the recordings of my talks. You have not agreed to talk to other people who were there that day. Until you do, I'm not talking with you. And if I had said that more carefully, they wouldn't have outed me. So some of us do not communicate very well and articulately under duress. We regress. It happens. And, I'm studying how to grow myself back up. But yeah, all the people who are, who disinvited me are, all now gone to Enso Village, to Zen Center's retirement community. And the new people are not going to be burdened with what they did or didn't do, or who thought what about who, or so they said, fine, come and give a talk. And we'll see if we want to do more things together. So we'll see.
How did it feel for you to go back?
Very good, and it felt very welcoming, and the building felt very familiar, even though they've had a lot of work done, and there's a lot of changes in the way things look. And at the same time, it felt again like a warm-hearted place. But it was a strange experience, to have Zen Center, what had been my home, or what I thought of as home. And, there's various ways where you can't go home anymore. And, and things could have been differently. But on the other hand, in thinking about it, well, it was time for me to go out and more on my own, and not to be trying to still live at home. And in some ways, if you look at it psychologically or whatever, or mythically, you leave home to undergo a journey or a quest, and so I've ended up in a different place and in different circumstances, and found people who are supportive and have a place to live and so on. And here you are inviting me to come on. Look at all these.
Absolutely. And yeah, absolutely. We're so happy to have you. Getting back to your teaching style. So I see a couple things that I can really identify with. And one is, it's hard to separate you from Suzuki Roshi because he has so much influence on you. But talking about finding your way in the dark, but inclusion. I see a lot of inclusion in your teaching, inclusion of, as I said earlier, just the vast array of human conditions and emotions, and particularly, obviously, in cooking. You say often schools of practice preach that when you're cooking, you should only manifest perfect love and equanimity, so that the food does not convey negativity. I'm thinking of my days as a dishwasher in the Elks Club in Walnut Creek, and Bud, the cook there. But I would never have cooked a single meal if held to this standard! Exclamation point. In my school, learning to transform negativity in and out of the kitchen is what nourishes us.
Yeah. Well, there's my idea.
That's your school. But what is it about this inclusive, bringing the whole self into the kitchen?
Well, there's two sides to that, and one side is, as I say, I had to come up with my own version of Zen because I couldn't do the perfect picture book version. I couldn't do the, you see pictures of Zen monks who sitting impassively, and yeah. And when was the last time you were in the kitchen? And that's not where you are now. And anyway, so all I could do is more and more over the years, I realized that this is Zen. And, and then you come across teachings. Suzuki Roshi, one of the quotes stayed with me, has always stayed with me. And he said, when you are you, Zen is Zen. He didn't say, when you have a quiet mind, and when you, have subdued your afflictive emotions and blah, 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 then we'll call that Zen. When you are you. So and it's like, in its way, it's like a koan. What does that mean, when you are you? And which you is he talking about? Because he used to say, when you are you, Zen is to settle the self on the self, and he'd settle the self on the self, and he'd point to his abdomen, to his heart. And then he'd say, and when monkey mind when small mind becomes quiet, big mind resumes its true activity. But he was, teaching Zen. Big mind doesn't come and go. Big mind's not appearing and disappearing. All I can do is trust that teaching. Big mind is here. And then every so often you come across something else. Dogen said, continue practicing, aim to hit the mark. Whatever happens, keep aiming to hit the mark. If you miss 99 times, keep aiming to hit the mark. What is it to hit the mark? It's to realize that you are Buddha on the spot without changing anything about your body or your mind. So I did that because I had no choice. I couldn't manufacture, a Buddha. Look at me. I've accomplished this. I've done that. Don't I look good, or don't I? Do I qualify now? Don't I qualify? And I couldn't. So I never was very successful at looking as good as some of the other people look.
Mm-hmm. But even in addition to that, the way, at least in our teaching, the way we look at this darkness as a gateway, as a gate, that thing itself, which is so dark, can flip. And let me just read another little story for you, if I might. Right in the midst of this sea of emotions, it seemed that someone had called my name, Ed. Perhaps it needed repeating to get by my steely concentration of preparing lunch. Also, the Ed being called was the most wonderful and wholesome person. I love that. So you're just awash in your emotions and the difficulty of getting lunch out. And somebody's calling your name Ed, and it's the most wonderful sound that you've heard. While I was a storm of emotions, as you say. And who was being called? I was befuddled, at least momentarily. Could it be that I was the person being called? What was happening? Bewildered, I tentatively looked around and discovered that Suzuki Roshi was standing in the doorway of the kitchen. Abruptly, the storm lifted, clearing without a trace, while energy sparkled up and down my spine. Bright light came from above. I was someone I had never met before, someone spacious and clear, someone blessed and holy. So this quality of that gate, that darkness.
Some great stories.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. And it's interesting to me when I think about those. On the other side of that is, I don't know how much of that. I mean, I know the rock. He moved the rock because he thought about it. And I don't know what brought him to the kitchen at that time. But if I ever thought Roshi wants me to this or Roshi thinks I should that, and I'd get a little bit confused, I would watch him closely, and he was doing his practice. He was not seeing what he could do for me. He was doing him. And he was putting all of his attention on how you bow and where your hands go and where your head comes and touching the floor and standing up. And he was in his world and in his practice. And then somehow, here he is in my world, in my practice. I don't know. It's mysterious. And but that he used to say, that's why we practice. We practice to open your intuition, to open your poetic imagination.
To purify your heart. Right?
To purify your heart. To purify, his expression that day was to purify your love.
Mm.
And then it's not that he's consciously going to I'm going to run some energy up and down his spine. He's showing up and he's connecting, energetically connecting with your presence. And in order to do that, you have to see when Dogen says you are Buddha on the spot. You have to see Buddha on the spot, regardless of what you're feeling or thinking, without changing anything. You are also, Buddha on the spot. And he stays with me. It's hard to know what's me and what's him,
Yeah, it's beautiful. The second thing I see in your teaching and reading your books and chewing on a little bit is your desire to empower people. And it really kind of comes down to somebody asks you a question, how much salt did you put in the soup? And you kind of shake your head when you hear that question, because it's the amount of salt that person as an individual needs. In other words, they have to find out what the right saltiness of the soup is themselves. And you seem to teach that an awful lot.
that's my aim. And again, it comes back to, most cooking classes have recipes. And I started in my cooking classes having tastings, and we would add one ingredient at a time. I haven't done it in many years, but so we, whether it's a tomato sauce, or it's a Chinese noodle salad, or there's each class has some tasting, and one ingredient at a time. You add one ingredient and taste it. So you don't put in all the ingredients and like, well, what does it need? Well, how would you know? You put in all the ingredients and put them all in the pot, and then you tasted it. How do you know what each ingredient did? And you learn that by adding one ingredient at a time and tasting. And then people say it needs salt, and I say, before we start adding more salt, let's add some tartness, some lemon, lime, or vinegar. Let's add some pungent, some heat. Let's in German scharf, and let's add some black pepper, red pepper, green chili, red chili, garlic, mustard, ginger. Let's add some tartness and some pungent before we start adding more salt, because salt is overused to bring up flavor. And then where's the pungent and where's the spicy and so we make this sauce for the Chinese noodle salad, soy sauce, salt, right? And then if it's tamari, then you have to add at least twice as much water just to make it palatable, because it is so salty. And then you add sugar to taste, and then you add vinegar to taste, and you have what's called a teriyaki sauce. But teriyaki sauce is 2 parts soy to 1 part sugar, 1 part vinegar. And I say, we're going to do it to my taste. You do it, when you get home, you do it to your taste. And then that tastes pretty good. Salt, sweet, and sour. And then the sour makes a big difference, because then with the vinegar, it starts to tingle in your mouth. It starts to have some what's called brightness, vibrancy. And then you add pungent. You add garlic and ginger and red pepper, and each one is a little different. And the flavors, it's not just heat, but the flavors fill your mouth. And you think salt is going to do that? Salt doesn't fill your mouth with flavor. It focuses the flavor and makes it more condensed, maybe, but it doesn't go, taste this. So I have tastings, and and then if you want, you can add one thing at a time. And I may do another cookbook. My idea is to do another cookbook. We'll see if I get to it, and if I get enough help, I'll get to it. But then I have to organize the help. But to teach this as a book, adding one ingredient at a time.
Oh.
This is beyond no recipe.
Uh-huh.
Come up with a recipe by adding one ingredient at a time and seeing how it is and what you like.
How has your cooking changed over these decades? And are you completely self-taught? Did you follow anybody? Do you read cookbooks or?
Early on I read books, and there was, but I love, the books I fell in love with weren't always helpful for how to cook. But I read M.F.K. Fisher, going back to when I was 10. And one of her books, I think, was called The Gastronomical Me. I couldn't even pronounce gastronomical, but she was quoted. One of the critics at the time, Bennett Cerf, was quoted as saying, "M.F.K. Fisher writes about food as others write about love, only better."
Yeah.
And I had the good fortune to meet MFK Fisher, one of my heroes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there were various books, and then I just watch people and I study, and what do they do? And anybody who came to Tassajara and knew something about food, I'd say, well, show me. And and I'd watch Mrs. Suzuki cut vegetables. I watch Kobenchino cut vegetables. I watch Tassajara Roshi cut vegetables. I watched how they moved in the kitchen. I watched Bill Kwong. He came down for 3 weeks one year. He had cooked at Zen Center for years, making breakfast. And, there were many people better qualified than me, but to be the head cook at Tassajara, but they had families and they had jobs and they had careers and they had kids. And I was 21 and didn't have a family. And okay, you can have a few years of my life, no problem. So no, and then when we started out, we were serving the guests meat. So I studied Julia Child. Julia Child wrote extraordinary, Mastering the Art of French Cooking was to this day one of my favorite books. Not that I haven't used it in years, but I had certain cookbooks that I used and relied on. But so one of the things that's changed is I stopped trying to make things the way that they were supposed to be, and I made things the way that I make them. And which is a problem, and which is okay. And then on the other hand, it's a problem because people like things that, hamburger and fries. Come on, where is it? And every so often I have things that like, oh my, this is extraordinary, and they just did this at home. But like, whoa, where was it finally? Anyway, it was somewhere in Austria. They made some homemade potato chips, where somehow the potato chips were like flowers instead of like individual chips of potato flour. And how do they? And I don't know. I can't do that. So I don't try to do everything. I say, well, thank you. That's great. I love it. And I'll do what I do. And, thank you for doing what you do. And so.
It's the original. Well, one thing that you mentioned is that you're eating meat more. For years, you were strict vegetarian, and then you found, I guess, that for health reasons that you will bring some meat into your diet.
In Sun Farms, which is out in Inverness, one year, and when I for years I had a writing studio out in Inverness, and for more than 30 years. And so I would go past the Marin Sun Farms where they sold organically, grass-fed meats, and I thought I'll try something. And I had I brought home some ground beef, and I made some burgers, and I thought, oh my God, these are so good. And then I noticed, like, I have more energy than I used to. So, I don't worry about it much. I was also a student and I still study, and in a way, Chinese medicine. And in Chinese medicine, they say, and there's an amazing book, The Vegetarian Myth. Lear Keith, a woman named Lear Keith, who was a vegan for 20 years and very proud of it. And she tells about how she had degenerative bone atrophy or whatever it was. And she finally saw a Qigong master. And she said, I've never felt so received and held and touched. And, this is a gay woman. This is a man. But you know, she's also, of course, a sensitive person, and he felt her pulses, and he said, "You have no pulse." He said, "Oh, you have no pulse." And she said, "Oh, you mean I'm going to die?" He said, "You all die eventually, but you have no pulse." And then he felt down her back and got to where there was a degenerative bone disease, and he just very quietly said, "Oh." And he didn't say, you know, "Oh my God," or, you know, but just, "Oh." And then he said, "What are you eating?" And she said, "Oh, I'm very proudly, you know, I'm a vegan. I'm saving the world." And he said, well, and, you know, we teach life lives on life. And he said, you know, and he gave her the common teaching in Chinese medicine is meat the size of your palm each day, or 3 times a week or something, I don't know. She went from there and she got a can of tuna fish and a plastic fork from the natural food store, and she said, "I had to wait until there was nobody in the line because I couldn't walk into the store and walk out without debilitating pain if I needed to stand in line at all." And she went on a diet now. She's on a diet, you know, with bone broth, cooking bones and then adding meat to them, and et cetera, et cetera. But it's an amazing story, you know, because it's all about vegetarian. And then she says, "I'm not trying to tell you what to eat. I'm trying to say there are choices." Because not so long after she wrote this book, she was invited to talk at a conference of vegans in Golden Gate Park. And before she could talk, she was pepper sprayed by some hefty vegans in their leather jackets. And she couldn't give her talk. She was taken to the...
Oh, yes.
And she said, I'm not here to tell people what to eat. I'm here to tell them they have a choice.
Mm. Let me just say, those who want to ask questions, we'll start taking questions now or shortly. Please just put them in the chat box, and we'll read from the chat box if that's okay. Well, things are changing. Things, yeah, learning to be more and more open and accepting is it's an important thing for all of us.
You know, if I tell people, you know, in my kitchen, I'm the cook, but when you get home, you're the cook. So you decide what you want to eat.
Yeah.
You have choice, and if you choose to be vegan, thank you. You've made your choice. You know understand it, and you know act in your follow your belief, your study, your practice. So this is where we fortunately get to have areas where you know each of us is the cook, and in some ways each of us, you know, you are you, and it's nobody else can take your place.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have these choices to make, and I'm not here to tell you what to do in your kitchen or in your life. I'm here to encourage you in your study, in your practice.
Yeah. We're kind of getting down to the most important point, and you say that the secret of life is enjoyment. The joy is not dependent on any particular product. It's not dependent on you controlling things, not having anger, not having sadness. The secret to life is enjoyment. And you put in a poem by Derek Walcott, and I love the last line. It's called the poem's called Love After Life.
Love after life.
The last line is sit, feast on your life. You know, I just love that line.
Feast on your life. One day you will greet yourself arriving at your own door in your own mirror. Each will say to the other, no, let's see. One day you will greet yourself arriving at your own door in your own mirror. Each will smile at the other, saying, "Sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself. To the stranger who's loved you all your life, whom you ignored for others." Go ahead, take down the book, take back the desperate notes. Take down the photographs from the bookcase, take back the desperate notes, peel your image back from the mirror and sit, feast. Feast on your life. It's a wonderful.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Do we have some questions, I think. Let me see. We've got hi Ed. So Penny says hi Ed, and Charles Hoy says love you Ed. Chuck Hoy, and Dan Kaplan says so wonderful to see you and hear you again Ed. And then Penny says further, it's your old friend Penny Jennings from Tassajara. It's good to see you at this point in your life. What is the most important thing for you in life?
Yeah.
It's still important to me to. I spent a lot of years looking for connection, and it's only in about the last 5 years I realized, oh, I'm the one who needs to give that or receive that. It's not to find it anywhere outside. So that's become really important to me to, share my heart with my heart, like that poem, and to have breathe with a warm-hearted feeling, and with some compassion for someone who's gotten so many, anyway, we all have experiences that, we do well and we do poorly. And at some point one thinks, well, I could become more masterful. I don't think so. But I can have a warm-hearted feeling for someone who's never gotten to be quite so masterful. And I find that really important. And I find it important then to encourage others to have that kind of warm-hearted feeling for themselves and for their good heart, their good hearts.
Another question of the sourdoughs, of the what do you where do you rank or of the breads? Where do you rank sourdough?
It's such a chore. By the way, the 55th anniversary edition of the bread book's coming out October the 7th. So and they're returning back to something approaching the original cover, and the color of the cover and the circular design on the cover, and maybe something like the original cover. They've had so many covers over the years. But interestingly enough, you see, part of the problem of ranking breads is that I don't eat much bread anymore. And it's not that my partner, Margot, doesn't eat gluten, so okay. But I can eat gluten, but I don't feel that great if I eat very much gluten. And I feel kind of full and heavy. So I don't eat so much bread. And my favorite bread these days that I make from time to time, because I can do it in a short period of time, is olive oil bread usually with rosemary. So my daughter and her family come. I often will make them olive oil bread because I know my granddaughter loves it. But every so often, I tried out some recipes. And the problem with sourdough, the sourdough was always so delicious, and sourdough pancakes were, people made sourdough pancakes and used to write to me about how great those were, and sourdough starter anymore. You have to keep it up, and then I'd have to start over again. And so I'm not, as usual, I'm not, and when this, curiously enough, when the book, I have two friends who are, now in their 60s or 70s, and one of them, and they both started baking from my book, at 16 or 17 in their mom's kitchen. And one of them bread and selling it door to door out of the back of his woody station wagon in the suburbs of Bloomington, Indiana. And about 30 years later, he sold his bakery for $35 million.
Wow.
And he said, well, if you're going to redo the bread book, you have to put it in quantities. It has to all be unmeasured, because then you'll get predictable results. I said, no. We're not into predictable results. We're into using what you have on hand and the ingredients you have and the time you have, and seeing what you feel like today, and understanding you have some choices, and see what you can see how it comes out.
Nice. Please put yourself on mute if you're just check that setting. If you could just
I'd like to say, can you hear me?
Who are you? Can you identify yourself?
My name is Ann Hinkle.
Oh, hi, Ann. Okay.
I'm a student of Ed's, and I would like to thank you, dear Edward, for this precious time tonight.
You're welcome.
You continue to be my beloved teacher. Yes, since the late 70s. So I am very grateful to be here tonight and to honor you and your laughter and your wisdom.
Thank you, Ann.
My pleasure, Edward.
For the benefit of those who are just meeting Ann, she was one of my two backups when I had my sit down with the Habits Council.
Yeah.
Ann and a gentleman called Peter Coyote.
Right. I know. I'm honored to be.
We had Peter on this program a couple of years ago. He's tremendous. Yeah.
But Ann
and Peter were very articulate at that meeting.
I so loved assisting you at Tassajara for many years in your cooking classes.
And now Ann does what she wants in her house. And it's good.
Thank you, Ann. I wanted to check in with David Chadwick, if that's okay.
Yes.
And we'll put you on mute if that's okay, Ann. Come on off mute if you want to say something else. David Chadwick, I didn't realize until Margot pointed out that you are on. So could you unmute and just put your voice in the room, please?
Yeah, I wrote a message too. Do you see my message?
I did. You said, "Hi, Ed. Great to see you and hear you this morning. Katrinka's here too. Thanks for being you and doing what you do. 9 bows."
Yeah.
David, how nice.
Oh. Hi, Ed.
What time is it there in Bali?
It's a little after 10 in the morning.
Oh, there you go. Come on. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a good time. You came on at 9 a.m. Yeah. Yep, that's good. But Ed and I have stayed in touch through the years. Ed has been very supportive of, the work I do. And,
John's, your group, the Pacific Zen Sangha, or,
Institute, yeah.
donate through your PayPal or one of your PayPals or something. So David, I support David.
Yeah,
right,
well,
right.
Pacific Zen Institute is the Cuke Archives fiscal sponsor.
Yeah, there you go.
Right.
And it takes 0%. There is no other fiscal sponsor that does that. I probably shouldn't remind them. But
John,
it works very well,
Well, I know you and John Tarrant go way back, and we've always been very, very supportive of all the great work you do, David. Yeah.
Thank you. One thing I want to say, I mean, I could say so many things about Ed. One thing is, well, Ed's very emotional, but he's very effective. Everything he's done very well. I don't think anybody else could have done a better job of him at Tassajara in those early days as cook. And Ed functions very well under pressure. Even better under pressure. And we'd have a lot of time, like there's one time I remember we were all through and we were all tired and the dining room crew had gone home. And I went in and I said, Ed, I swear, 12 people just arrived and they're hungry. And it was like, it was time for evening sausage. And, without hesitating, he said, well, let's do it. And I don't know how you came up with I went over and got the dining room ready, and it seemed like miraculously had it all together. There was no complaining, no nothing. And, just did it. Also,
youth. Youth. Youthful energy. Vitality.
Yeah. Anyway, it was consistent. It was, was always there, and it was great. It was a very small kitchen, like he said, and there was guest and student food coming out of it, and it was great. But also through the years, everything he's done is really good. The books, also the editing he did. Not Always So is an extremely well edited book of Shunryu Suzuki lectures. And, Zen Mind Beginner's Mind it has enormous name recognition and it still sells a lot. But a lot of that, is because of the name and Not Always So is right up there in the same place. I think, and also his work. Well, I'll say one thing. My agent who got me to write and do everything, and worked with Ed a lot, Michael Katz, used to say to me, pretty much, well, can you write a little more like Ed Brown? Really, because Ed is very, very, very expressive. And I tend to be a little bit more like a reporter. So, anyway, I remember that.
Well, save your stories, David, because you're going to come on this venue in several months with your first of 3 books about Tassajara. Is that right?
Yeah, Tassajara Stories.
Yeah. Fabulous.
And
fabulous.
I just got an email about the contract for the second book. We didn't talk about the second. They knew there was a second book, but we didn't talk about it, Monkfish. So that's nice. And I've already made the audio book for the second book. But anyway, that's enough of that. Anyway, I could sing Ed's praises, but it's when we hang up, I'll think, oh, I should have said so. I should have said.
Yeah. So several chats saying thanks, deep gratitude, Pacific Zen, John, thanks. And Ed, remember the time I walked into the small kitchen, flour was everywhere they said, Ed lost it. That's Charles Hoy and Judy Herzl. So, let's finish. Ed, if you could, I would love to have you just say the mealtime chant for us. We venerate the three treasures, and
Oh, well,
could you just finish with that for us?
I can do the meal chant. This is a meal chant that I do that I think it may have been originally Gary Snyder. I'm not sure, and it was I used my version of it because there's various versions of it, and then I added a second section to it. We venerate the three treasures and give thanks for this food, the work of many people, the offering of other forms of life. May this food nourish us, body, mind, and spirit. May all beings be happy, healthy, and free from suffering.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that blessing. And thank you, Edward Espe Brown, for coming on and sharing with us your life and your work.
Thank you, John. And thank you for the stories. I was thinking of some of those stories about Suzuki Roshi, and you read them. Thank you. Well done. And thank you all for being here, and all the best with, as David said about me, for you being you and doing what you do, continuing to feel your way along in the dark.